Today we're talking about when to go to Disney when unfortunately we can't be there every day.
Welcome to Always Planning Disney, where planning is half the fun. I'm Melissa.
And I'm Cheryl.
And on this channel, we talk through all the details that go into making our vacations magical.
So today the big question is, how do you pick when to go to Disney World? We have a bunch of considerations, right? Because that's who we are. Mm-hmm. So what are the main things that you're thinking about when you decide when to go?
I think the major thing we consider when we're choosing when we're going to Disney is the ages of everybody who is going with us. Because a trip with our kids when they were real little is so much different than a trip when they're bigger. Mm-hmm. So where we're staying, how many days we're staying, mode of transportation. Ages really dictate a lot of the planning. So we usually start with how old do we want everybody to be when we go? What about you?
Before the kids turn 3, they don't have to have a park ticket and they don't have to be on the dining plan when that comes back. So that was definitely a big factor for our last trip, is that we wanted to get in before our son turned 3 years old, and he actually turned 3 on that trip. So that was a big part of timing the trip right before his 3rd birthday. So he actually turned 3 in the Magic Kingdom, which was super special.
Oh, so we had a trip where my youngest, Jack, was free because he was an infant, maybe 5 months old. And then when we returned, he was 3.5. So he was no longer free, which made a big difference. And then also the Disney adult cutoff is rather low. So we took a trip where my daughter was now suddenly an adult in terms of eating at restaurants. Adult rates. She was adult for everything. And that was something we didn't anticipate before, because generally kids things have a little bit of a larger range before they're charged adult fees for things. But at Disney, it comes pretty early, and we did not anticipate that.
Yeah, I will keep that in mind as my kid gets older, to try and sneak in some more trips before he becomes a Disney adult, because that had to be a rude awakening when it came to your budget for the trip.
Yep. And that's one of the biggest things we consider when we're choosing when to go, is the cost of the trip. And I don't know if there are times that are noticeably more affordable, because we always go in January and February.
And that's one of the most affordable times of year to go, right? Like, I think it's in maybe the second to lowest tier, as long as you're not in that marathon or Martin Luther King Jr. Day weekend range, where it does get a little bit busier and a little bit more expensive, of course. But yeah, that's one of the less expensive times to go. And that's definitely a factor for us too, because if we're gonna go for the same amount of time, I'd rather spend less money on going and get more out of it, right? And maybe go a little bit longer, because we can afford to go a little bit longer. So it's hard to look at like 2 different weeks that might work for us on the calendar, and one of them is the most expensive time, and one of them is, towards the least expensive time. Like, I'm going to save some money.
And expense is something that we consider in planning the trips, first because Disney is so expensive, and second because it helped us figure out how often we were going to go as a family. Because the first trip, my daughter was in kindergarten, and that trip was specifically for her early childhood trip to Disney. We had to get it in. And when I started planning that trip, and I got the Disney planning DVDs in the mail back when we'd sit and we'd watch them during her. She's not a napper, but we would watch like a movie every afternoon, and we'd watch Disney planning DVDs. And I went and priced it out and said, oh no, that is more than I was expecting it to be. And it was a big deal, because even though this might be getting a little too deep here, but when we finally reached the age where like we have to take her to Disney, it was a difficult financial decision, because when she was younger, money was so super tight. And I hate to say that we were hit hard with the recession, because we didn't have any retirement savings, so there's nothing to lose there. But, we didn't find
Same.
ourselves, in a foreclosure or whatever. But
Right.
we did find ourselves, me, 7 months pregnant, Ray's work shut down. I had no maternity leave. So I had to scrape together like $1,000 that I thought would last me until I could, figure out what was next. And it takes time to dig yourself out of that.
Yeah.
And even when we had the money for that trip to Disney, looking at it, it still felt like I can't spend that because what if we're going to need it? So
Yeah.
I put it off a year, and then I was pregnant, and I was not going when I was pregnant because
No, I
no way.
can't.
No way. And so the next year, my daughter's in kindergarten, we had to go. And
Yeah.
it was nice because I had stalled for that little bit of time and we managed to save more.
Yeah, that's a big consideration in terms of like, do you want to go as soon as you can and just to be there, right? Just to live in the magic. And maybe it has to be a really lockdown budget kind of trip. Or do you want to wait a little bit longer and splurge a little bit more? And we tend to be splurgers. Like when we're in Disney, we don't want to be counting every penny on our trip. Like we're not going crazy or anything like that, but we want to feel like, if we want to try that fun new snack and it's kind of a ridiculous price because you're in Disney, that we can indulge in that. So we would rather wait just a little bit longer to be able to do that. Hopefully not too long.
Mm-hmm. So after a trip when my daughter was in kindergarten, we knew we'd have to go back. And the original plan was when my son was in kindergarten. So about 5-6 years later, which would have been this year right now. And I think that 5-year spread is definitely something that would work for us in terms of being able to have the type of trip that we really want.
Yeah.
But we could not wait. And because our kids, we go to the park all day. We're not at the hotel very much. So staying at one of the value resorts is fine for us. We're not doing a lot of hotel things anyway. And we fell into a 3-year pattern. We figured every 3 years is great. The cost is not so substantial that we're feeling pressed going every 3 years. And because we're not looking to stay at the more expensive place, 3 years is wonderful for us. And that's the pattern we've fallen into.
That's a really nice amount of time. And so growing up, we went about every 5 years or so, thinking back on our trips. And I thought that's what we were going to do. And so we went for our son's 3rd birthday, and he of course was wondering when we were going to go back. And I said, oh, we'll probably go back when you're 8. And then we thought maybe we'll go back when you're 5. And then with the pandemic, Disney is going to be crazy for the next 5 years because so many parents have been stuck with their kids. Their kids are missing out on all of these experiences that normally they get in childhood. And it's sort of like, even if you're not a Disney parent like you and I are, many people are saying like, we're going to Disney. We're just going to do it. We're going to spend the money. We're going to take the kids to Disney. And so I think a lot of people who might not otherwise go are going to be going in the next few years here just because they haven't been able to. But for us, the pandemic really bumped up our timeline a bit. And so now we're planning on just under 3 years from our last trip. We were actually originally thinking that we would do 2 years from our last trip, but we want to wait and let the whole situation settle down and things to be safer and hopefully masks to no longer be required, because we live in Minnesota and I don't know if we can do masks in the Florida heat and humidity. I just don't know if we can manage that.
Yeah, so I said we fell into the 3-year pattern, but I guess there's an asterisk there because we should have been going in 2021. Probably January or February again, but knowing that it was a anniversary year, even if the anniversary is in October, I was afraid that there would be even more traffic and crowds. So we did push it up and we just had a 2-year gap. And even when we were getting on the plane, I felt that it was a little too soon. The memory of the last trip was fresh enough that it felt like, oh, we're going back again, as if it was one of the things that we do annually, like a camping trip or something. And so I had a little bit of, I guess, apprehension, even though I'd already booked it and we're getting in our seats in the, on the plane. But I still had that feeling that maybe that was a little too soon for us. Now, post-pandemic, I could go tomorrow and be okay, even
Yes,
though
please.
I was there a year ago. So yeah, everything feels a little bit different right now in terms of spacing of trips. But I did not think of in the next few years, the number of people who are going to be going just to have that feeling of getting out of everything we've lived through.
I'm just hearing it in my social circles from people who are not normally Disney people, who haven't gone themselves since high school. They've got younger kids and they're like, nope, we're going. My kid has missed 2 birthday parties because of the pandemic. We're taking them to Disney World. So I think we're going to see a lot of that. And I think as hard as it's been on Disney's finances being shut down so much, I think they're going to be making it up over the next few years with everybody going as soon as they can.
Yeah. And I like that we're talking about the when right now, because there are so many things that you can think about and get excited for and fake order off of menus, which is what I was doing when you sent me a text to schedule this recording. I was picking what I would order at Topolino's. But when you pick the year and the month and then that actual week or weekend, that's the real planning. That's when it starts. And so I mentioned we always go January, February,
Yeah.
which I think is because that's what I did as a kid. And so when I booked my first trip, I was like, well, we'll go in January because that's when you go. Do you have a favorite time of year?
So we've always gone sort of December through February, so not quite as tight of a time as your trips have been, but we would go sort of towards the end of Christmas break and maybe miss a little school in January growing up. And then we took some other trips when I was in college that were in January. And actually, I guess I actually did take one college trip that was over spring break. So that's probably the sort of most traditionally busy time of year that we've gone.
Mhm.
And our last trip was in February. So we've been a little more spread out, but always in times of year when it's not going to be insanely hot, because again, we're from Minnesota and it's not going to work out for us. We will melt in the summer heat. So that's just not even an option for us.
So I love heat. I will take hot over cold every day, but I will not do Disney in the summer. Even the spring, like late spring, makes me a little nervous because of the amount of walking. And I have one child who is just a sweaty mess all of the time, and he's not going to make it. It's not going to work. So we need cooler weather.
Yeah.
Sometimes we lose a pool day
Yes.
or two, because one time when we were there in January, there was a day where it was barely 50. It was cold. There's a picture of us at Epcot with like hoodies and jackets, and we had a blanket over Jack in the stroller. It was cold that day. So that's the one downside, is that you're going to run into the cooler temps in the morning and at night when you go, especially in January. So there's always your provisional, you have to bring a sweater with you just in case. It's more things to carry, but we can walk all day and nobody is melting, dehydrated.
Absolutely. That's so important to us.
So when we go in those winter months, a lot of times things are closed or being refurbished or rides down, or there's scaffolding somewhere. Do you ever take that into consideration when you're booking a specific week?
I think a lot of times we don't know about some of those refurbishments in advance. I mean, with as far in advance as we're booking. And so that can be a little tricky, because if they were refurbishing some of our very favorite rides that we have to go on, like we're very competitive with Buzz Lightyear. And so if that ride was down, that'd be a major bummer for our group. But a lot of those things you don't know quite far enough in advance to take them into account. But some of the rides that tend to go down every year are like Splash Mountain or Kali River Rapids. And we don't tend to ride those anyways, just because like we're wusses and don't want to walk around the park all mushy. So those don't really bother us if they happen to be down. It's not a huge deal for us.
I remember booking when we booked Pop Century once, and the website told us there's going to be like room refurbishments. We only do construction between these hours, and we booked it, and you never would have known. It wasn't messy or loud. There weren't paths that were closed down. I think the one pool, I think Hippy Dippy Pool was closed when we were there, but there's 2 other ones and a splash pad, so it was fine. But yeah, one day I would like to ride Splash Mountain. It has been closed every time we've been there, but I can wait until it's been rebranded with Tiana, who I have on my mug today too. Because
Oh, I love it.
what about planning around festivals or special events? Do you have ones you like to hit? Do you have any that you avoid?
We haven't hit a ton of them so far. And I think as we've been like learning more through different like social media outlets and things like that, we're getting a better sense of what's going on at Disney year round. And now we just want to do all of it. So I don't think I could commit to, like, I know you love going at the same time of year every year. And that would like be too limiting for us, because we're like, well, we loved Festival of the Arts and that was a ton of fun, but we also want to do Flower and Garden and we want to do Food and Wine. Like, we really enjoyed eating our way around all of the festival booths, and we'd like to continue doing that.
Yeah, so I love Festival of the Arts, which is great because that's when we tend to be there. I
Mhm.
think one year they had just when we went, they had just started the Flower and Garden one because I remember the topiaries.
Mm,
I think it was like the very beginning, like one of the first days of it. And so I'd like to do Food and Wine once also,
yeah,
but I don't know if I am scheduling trips around Epcot festivals yet, even though Epcot is one of my favorite parts of going to Disney, only because the weather outweighs pretty much all of those other things. And I know that
that's fair.
the festival's a little different every time.
Yeah. We are excited though, because next time we're planning a trip in not Christmas itself, but earlier in December when the Christmas decorations will be up. And my husband has never seen Disney all decked out for Christmas. So he's really excited to see all of that. And I think it's going to be fun too. Hopefully they've brought back the storytellers in Epcot again, because that was so much fun. So I'm excited to see all of that again, because it's been a few trips since I've been able to do that.
Yeah. Are you lining that one up with the school break too, or just?
I'm not sure. I kind of doubt we'll be able to. And so that trip, our son will be in kindergarten. So we don't feel like it's a huge issue to pull him out, hopefully. It sounds like our school district is pretty okay with with family vacations. So that's a good sign. But that is going to be a bigger consideration as he gets older. Is that something you're running into with your kids?
Yeah, so the first trip when my daughter was in kindergarten, didn't worry so much because it was kindergarten. She um, academically excels. That's just who she is. And I knew that a week away, it wouldn't be a big deal. And then again, as they get older, it's always, I do feel a little strange saying, oh, my kid's going to be out for this whole week.
Yeah.
And I don't worry about my daughter because she can catch up. She can do her work on the plane, which she did last time, like a whole week's worth of math, in like a 2-hour flight. But my son, he does well in school, but he needs a lot more help and assistance.
Yeah.
And missing a day sets him back or just kind of like throws him off. And
Sure.
I am worried about that in the future, more for what he's going to miss out on that week. It's a bigger deal for him.
Yeah. And I also think about, like, as the kids get older and older, like, what happens when it's high school and the stakes are higher in their classes and they have, extracurricular activities that they maybe can't miss out on, and all of that stuff. And that makes me kind of want to take the trips on our own schedule now while I feel like we can, because I think just the older he gets, the harder it's going to be to pull him out of school.
Yeah, it definitely gets harder as they get older. And aiming for school breaks is difficult because they tend to be busier times of year and
Yeah.
more expensive times of year. And that is exactly what we are avoiding when we pick our week to go. Is when is it cheaper? And especially when is it less busy? I used the crowd prediction calendars that
Mhm.
are floating around to help me choose. I am not sure if they are accurate. Do you look at those?
I do. We looked at them when we planned our last trip, and I think we were looking at maybe out of 10, the crowds were supposed to be like 2 to 4 for the whole time that we were there. And then they adjust them after the fact, reflect what crowds actually look like. And they were up to like 8
Okay.
on many of the days that we were there. And I said, oh, that's why it felt so busy, is because it actually was that busy.
It was. And I guess
Yeah.
it's helpful to know our last trip we were there the same week.
Hmm.
And we were there and it's like, this feels really busy.
Yeah.
Just like humans around me, it felt a little closer walking through the parks.
Yeah.
Wait times felt a little bit longer.
It was not what we were expecting and not what we were hoping in terms of crowd levels, because we really wanted a time that was going to be quieter. And yeah, but now I think looking ahead to these crowd calendars, they're going to be completely inaccurate again for probably 5 years.
Right. And when you were there, was it the cheerleading competition?
Yes, we
Yeah.
had some cheer groups, and we weren't staying at hotels where there were massive groups of them, but they definitely were taking up, entire ladies' rooms and like big chunks of the walkway. And oh, we got on the monorail and I had a terrible headache. And my husband and I thought we had the monorail car to ourselves, and on walks an entire group of cheerleaders very loudly enjoying their evening. So that was rough.
Yeah. I think that's the second time we've gone during the cheerleading competition. We've stayed in a hotel with them, and that has been fine. I'd say like you don't notice that there's large groups of cheerleaders at the hotel, but I think of all the groups that you could potentially room next to and travel Disney with, the cheerleaders are okay. It's not as bad as I think maybe some other large groups could be. But
Yeah.
it is true that if you get, 20 people in a group in a bathroom or on the bus with you, it definitely makes it feel more crowded.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I knew was a factor at that time of year. And I had actually looked at the ESPN calendar to see if I could get a sense of it. And again, they didn't have that information far enough in advance to book our trip, because we were booking a DVC room. And so that's 11 months out. And they don't have that information available 11 months out. So I knew it was a risk. I knew it was a gamble, and it wasn't a huge issue for our trip by any means. But I think it's just something to be aware of when you're going during that January, February time of year.
I think avoiding the marathon is probably far more important. That's definitely something I wouldn't want to have to plan around.
Unless you are running in the marathon, of course, but
Well, yes, which I am not
for the
doing
rest of us, no.
ever.
So when we were going every 5 years growing up, my mom had always said, oh, well, we want things to feel exciting. We don't feel like we've just done them. We want there to be new things to do, because, Disney's always adding things. And so that was sort of her justification for every 5 years. I'm sure there were other factors as well, but I felt like that sort of made sense with like a 5-year trip cycle, or even a 3-year trip cycle. Like that's a lot of time for there to be new things at Disney World. But I'm wondering, since you just had 2 between your last 2 trips, did it feel like it was still fresh? Did you feel like you had new things to do, or was it like, oh, I was just on It's a Small World like last week, like did it feel like you had just been there, or was it still really exciting and fun?
It felt, when we got there, it felt very comfortable. I'm going to say, like you're returning home. And the thing that I think there was only one new ride since our last trip. But what was it? I'm trying to think now, because I remember when we were there, we were a little disappointed that we were too early for Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railroad. That was one we were looking forward to, and it wasn't open yet. And we kind of knew we were going to be on that cusp, and so we'd have to hit it next time. We also knew when we were going that Rise of the Resistance would be open, but we also knew we weren't going to even try for a boarding pass, because we were going to be at Hollywood Studios right after the plane landed. And so it just wasn't. And so that was one we're like, okay, well, we'll do it next time. So sometimes having the list of knowing we're going to be able to return and do these things helps with that anticipation and excitement. But with 2 years, it did feel a little bit like the last trip. So I think that's part of the reason for the 3 years. Now, if some of those rides would have been open within our 2-year window, I think it would have made a big difference. But I feel like we missed a lot of openings of a lot of new things with the timing that we went. And now it's going to really bug me. I swear there was one new ride. Oh, we also missed Slinky Dog Dash.
Oh, you didn't get on that one?
No, we didn't get on it. We didn't, I forgot that it was going to be open and we didn't get a fast pass. And then we were looking at the line and it was just so long.
Yeah.
And it was the day that we had landed in Orlando. So it was already a long day. And we just said, okay, next time. So our next time list is really long now. So that will be definitely fresh and exciting, even if it were tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that.
I think knowing the things that are coming and not always having the exact opening date is one of the parts of planning the next trip when we're going to be there that is, it's not stressful, but it's one of the more like delicate dances we do in trying to figure out when we're going to be there, because you don't always have that exact date. And you know, we were even thinking, wasn't Space 220 supposed to be open at that time too?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
And it still isn't.
I know it is.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to land. Is just like there's always going to be something new at Disney, and that's part of the fun of always having a next trip and figuring out how are all the pieces going to fit together in terms of our perennial favorites and also the new things that we are just dying to try. And for us, that's Remy's Ratatouille Adventure. That's our must-do item on our next list. So it's fun that we always have something to look forward to. And I think it's really fun to put all of the puzzle pieces together in terms of like, I'm going to make sure that, you know, for last trip, I made sure that we got on Rise of the Resistance. And it was real hard and it took us 3 days to do it, but we got on it for my husband. All right. Thanks so much for tuning into our very first episode. Let us know in the comments if there are any factors for when you visit Disney that we forgot to consider. We'd love to hear it. And if you'd like to hear more about our Disney plans, be sure to subscribe. Bye.
Bye.